All right, let's get right to it. Briefing begins now. Our subject, Project Rainbow, or as it's more widely known, the Philadelphia Experiment. Now, our objective today isn't to chase myths. It's to conduct a cold, hard, forensic analysis of what all the evidence points to, a catastrophic success in applied physics.
You know, this quote from the source material, it just perfectly frames this entire thing. It really gets to the core of the project's hubris, doesn't it? They were chasing this divine, almost Gnostic level science, but they were doing it with the mindset of wartime engineers. This wasn't about understanding the universe, it was about weaponizing it. So let's start with the theory, because you have to understand, this was never just about bending radar waves. At its very heart, this entire project was a militarized application of Einstein's great unfinished work, the unified fields theory. Now, this theory, this was the holy grail. It basically proposed that gravity and electromagnetism aren't two separate things, but two sides of the very same coin. And for the Navy, this theory held a frankly terrifying prediction. If you could generate an electromagnetic field that was powerful enough, you weren't just pushing electrons around, you were actually manipulating gravity, and by extension, the very fabric of space-time itself. This means the project really had two objectives. First, you had the minimum objective, the one they could put on paper. Radar invisibility, a perfect cover story, right? But then there was the true goal, the maximum objective. And that was something far more heretical. Spatiotemporal dislocation. We're talking about literally bending reality to your will. Now, you don't just pull off an experiment this audacious with any old ship. It required a very, very specific tool. So what we're going to do now is a forensic audit of the platform that was chosen for this sacrifice, the destroyer escort USS Eldridge. Look, the Eldridge wasn't just degaussed. It was brutally refit. Its turboelectric drive was rewired into a gigantic floating amplifier. Massive rainbow coils replaced its main gun turrets. Let's be clear, this thing wasn't a warship anymore. It was a weaponized physics apparatus, specifically designed to create a magnetic field of almost unimaginable power. But in all their calculations, the engineers made one catastrophic mistake, a fatal design flaw. They saw the crew as just passengers, not as what they had actually become, unshielded biological components that were integrated directly into this massive circuit. And that oversight, that was the direct cause of the biological horror show that came next. Okay, now we get to the main argument that's always used to debunk this whole event, the lie of impossible energy. We're going to dismantle that argument right here, right now, and we're going to use the project's own mathematics to do it. The official story, the one you'll always hear, is that the kind of power needed for this was pure science fiction in 1943. Well, that's a deliberate and, frankly, malicious misdirection. The question isn't whether it was possible for the public sector. The question is, what was possible behind the classified curtain? Let's just look at the numbers. To generate that sickly green fog that every single eyewitness described, that's a plasma sheath, and it's what you'd need to deflect radar waves. It would have required a power pulse of, at minimum, 19 gigawatts. That's not megawatts, gigawatts. And here's the context for that number. A 19 gigawatt pulse was almost half the entire sustained output of the US power grid at the time. So, impossible, right? No, not at all. At that exact moment, the Manhattan Project was building power infrastructure at Oak Ridge that was designed to handle precisely these kinds of massive energy loads. The capability didn't just exist, it was concentrated in a single, terrifying nexus of secret science. And that says it all, doesn't it? Debunkers can argue about who saw what, but they cannot argue with the math. The power calculation is a confession, written in the language of physics. The power was real, which means the experiment was real. So now we move from the how to the what happened. The goal was invisibility, but the result, the actual outcome, was a horrifying lesson in just how fragile that boundary between matter and energy really is. What happened here was an uncontrolled decoherence event. That's a technical term for when a system just collapses violently. So what does that mean? Well, the teleportation wasn't the goal. You see, it was a side effect of a catastrophic failure. The unstable electromagnetic field didn't just bend space-time. It tore the veil between dimensions. It literally unzipped the atomic structure of the ship and its crew. So when the field finally collapsed, matter didn't just snap back into place, it re-materialized chaotically. The consequences were apocalyptic. This stopped being a physics problem and became a grotesque fusion of biology and mechanics. We have reports of sailors fused into the steel bulkheads, others who just spontaneously combusted. Some were driven into a state of catatonic insanity, their minds completely unmoored from linear time. This is the human cost. This is what happens when you treat men like components in a circuit. The first public whispers of this Gnostic hell, they came from the testimony of a single witness, a merchant mariner named Carlos Miguel Allende. He claimed he watched the entire horrifying spectacle from the deck of his own ship. And his account is the thread that, when pulled, unravels the entire cover-up. You see, a catastrophe on this scale requires a cover-up of equal magnitude. And the evidence for that isn't in some dusty file cabinet. It's written in a trail of people who were permanently silenced. Take Morris K. Jessup. He was a credentialed astronomer, a real scientist, and he took Allende's claims seriously. He started digging. And as this timeline shows, the closer he got to the truth, the more dangerous his life became. He was found dead the night before a crucial meeting where he was planning to reveal new evidence. This wasn't a suicide. This was a silencing. And the paper trail doesn't stop there. Look at the crew's own records. The statistical anomalies in their deaths after the experiment, they're like a forensic fingerprint. 3 bridge officers, all dead in separate bar fights. The chief electrician, dead in a freak electrical accident. Another sailor just lost at sea. The witnesses said he just vanished. This is not coincidence. This is a covert cleanup operation. And here it is, the final nail in the coffin. The internal investigation files for these so-called accidents were sealed under a national security classification. Now, that level of secrecy is completely unheard of for simple training accidents. But you know what it is? It's standard operating procedure for casualties of a secret war. The paper trail proves the crime. So, the conclusion here is unavoidable. The math proves the experiment was physically possible. The cover-up proves it happened. Project Rainbow wasn't some isolated anomaly. It was the first catastrophic test of a technology that did not just disappear. And that leaves us with only one question. What else have they not told us? End of briefing.